This idea put me back into selling after I had quit. Looking back across the years, I am astounded how trivialities have changed the entire course of my life. As I have already said, after 10 miserable, disheartening months trying to sell life insurance, I gave up all hope of ever being able to sell anything. I resigned, and I spent several days answering one ads. I won a job as a shipping clerk because as a boy I had worked for the American Radiator Company, hammering nails into crates and stenciling them for shipment. With my limited education, I thought I could qualify for that kind of work. But try as I did, I couldn't even get a job as a shipping clerk. I was not only discouraged, I was in the depth of despair. I figured that I have to go back to riding my bicycle and collecting installments for George Kelly's. My highest hope was to get my old job back at $18 a week. I had left a fountain pen, a penknife, and a few other personal things at the insurance company office. So one morning I went back to get them. I expected to be there only a few minutes, but while I was cleaning out my desk, the president of the company, Mr. Walter Lemar Talbot, and all of the salesmen came into the bullpen to hold a meeting. I couldn't leave without embarrassment, so I sat there and listened to several salesmen talk. The more they talked, the more discouraged I got. They were talking about things I knew I couldn't possibly do. Then I heard the president, Mr. Talbot, utter one sentence that has had a profound and lasting effect on my life for the past 31 years. That sentence was this: Gentlemen, after all, this business of selling narrows down to one thing, just one thing: seeing the people. Show me any man of ordinary ability who will go out and earnestly tell his story to 4 or 5 people every day, and I will show you a man who just can't help making good. Well, that lifted me right out of my chair. I'd believe anything that Mr. Talbot said. Here was a man who had started working for the company when he was 11 years old, worked his way through every department, had actually been out on the street selling for several years. He knew what he was talking about. It was just as though the sun had suddenly burst out from the clouds. I made up my mind right then to take him at his word. I said to myself, "Look here, Frank Badger. You've got two good legs. You can go out and earnestly tell your story to 4 or 5 people every day, so you are going to make good." Mr. Talbot said so. But I was happy. What a great relief came over me, for I knew I was going to make good. That was just 10 weeks before the end of the year. I decided during that time to keep a record of the number of calls I made, just to be sure that I did see at least 4 people every day. By keeping these records, I discovered that I could make a great many more calls. But I also discovered that to average seeing people every day, week after week, was a big job. It made me realize how few people I really had been seeing previously. During those 10 weeks, I sold 50,000 dollars of life insurance, more than I had been able to sell during the entire previous 10 months. It wasn't much, but it proved to me that Mr. Talbot knew what he was talking about. I could sell. Then I became aware that my time was worth something, and I determined in the future to waste as little of it as possible. I didn't think it was necessary, however, to continue keeping records. From then on, for some reason, my sales fell off. A few months later, I found myself back in as big a rut as I had been before. One Saturday afternoon, I took myself back to the office, locked myself in a little conference room and sat down. For 3 hours, I sat there having it out with myself. What's the matter with me? Just what is it wrong? There was only one conclusion. I finally narrowed it down to one thing. I had to admit it. I wasn't seeing the people. How am I going to make myself see the people? I thought. I certainly have incentive enough. I need the money. I'm not lazy. Finally, I determined to go back to keeping records. 1 year later, I proudly stood up before our agency and enthusiastically told my story. I had secretly kept complete records of my calls for 12 months. They were accurate, for the figure were put down every day. I had made 1,849 calls. Out of these calls, I had interviewed 828 people and closed 65 sales. My commission amount to $4,251.82. How much was each call worth? I figured it out. Each call I had made net me $2.3. Think of it. 1 year previously, I had been so discouraged that I resigned. Now every call I made, regardless of whether I saw the man or not, put $2.30 in my pocket. I never could find words to express the courage and faith these records gave me. Later on, I will show how keeping records helped me organize myself so that I was gradually able to increase the value of my calls from $2.3 to $19 each. How over a period of years, I cut down my average of closing only 1 out of 29 to 1 out of 25, then 1 out of 20, 1 out of 10, and finally 1 out of 3. Let me give just one example now. The records show that 70% of my sales were made on the first interview, 23% on the second, and 7% on the third and after. But listen to this. 50% of my time was spent going after the 7%. So why bother with the 7%? I thought. Why not put all of my time on first and second interviews? That decision alone increased the value of each call from 2.8 to 4.27. Without records, we have no way of knowing what we are doing wrong. I can get more inspiration out of studying my own records than anything I can read in a magazine. Clay W. Hamlin, one of the world's greatest salesmen, has often inspired me as he has thousands of others. Clay told me he failed 3 times in selling before he began keeping records. You can't hit him if you don't swing at them. I found was just as true in selling as in basketball. When I played with the Cardinals, we had a right fielder named Steve Evans. Steve was a big, powerful fellow built on the lines of Babe Ruth, and he could hit a ball almost as hard as the Babe. But Steve had a bad habit, the habit of waiting. He usually had 2 strikes called on him before he began swinging. I remember one important game in St. Louis. It was Steve's turn to bat in the 9th inning with 2 out and the base full. Any kind of a hit would have won the game. Steve picked out his favorite bat and started for the plate. Everybody yelled, "Come on, Steve, hit that first ball." Taking his position at the plate, you could see Steve intend to slam that first one. The ball shot straight across the heart of the plate, but Evans never moved the bat off his shoulder. "Strike one," roared the umpire. "Come on, Steve, swing at the next ball," pleaded the players and the crowd. Steve dug his spike deep in the ground for a fresh 3-hole. Again the pitcher delivered one right through the middle. Again Steve failed to swing. "Strikes, 2!" below the arm. "Evans!" screamed Roger Bresnahan, our manager, from the third base coaching line. "What the hell you're waiting for? The first and the 15th, what do you think?" Steve yelled back in disgust. "The first and 15th were paydays." Every time I see salesmen sitting around the office during selling hours, playing solitaire with prospect cards, I again see Steve Evans up there with his bat on his shoulder, letting the good ones go by, and I hear Bresnahan yell, "Evans, what the hell you're waiting for?" Selling is the easiest job in the world if you work it hard, but the hardest job in the world if you try to work it easy. You know, a good doctor doesn't treat the effect, he treats the cause. So, let's get right down to the bottom of this proposition of selling. You can collect your commission until you make the sale. You can make the sale till you write the order. You can write the order till you have an interview. And you can have an interview till you make the call. There is the whole thing in a nutshell. There is no the whole foundation of this business of sellings. Calls.